Hey everybody, we're turning the tables a little bit. My name's Matt Behrend. I'm co-founder and CRO of Consensus, formerly DemoChimp. And normally Richard would be making this introduction, but the format today is a little different. I'm going to be asking Richard some questions. So I'm leading out. Richard, welcome to the Sales Hacker webinar, and thanks for allowing me to join you.
Oh, thank you. And actually, this one's a little bit more fun because it's different for me, so I'm pretty excited to be doing this one.
Yeah. So Richard and I chatted beforehand. We talked about, preparing the content for this and what our dialogue was going to be like, and, making sure that it was hard-hitting and interesting for everybody listening. And he wanted me to surprise him a little bit with some of the questions that we brought. So we'll see if we catch you off guard or not. But it should be interesting either way, and I loved preparing for this, so we'll see if everybody else likes it too. So, Richard, I have an introduction for you. Does everybody know you? Do you want me to give some background?
I would be a complete ass if I thought everybody in the world you don't need to elaborate a long time because I don't like to talk about myself, but I'm happy to give people some context.
Okay, great.
So feel free.
Okay, so context about Richard Harris. Let me share this, and cut me off if this goes too long. So Richard was recently awarded one of the top 25 most influential sales thought leaders by the American Association of Inside Sales Professionals. So congratulations for that. So he's worked with a lot of fantastic companies. I was looking over the list. It's very impressive, but typically helps early stage startups, expansion stage SaaS companies, and public companies too that are struggling to build, scale, or innovate with their sales orgs. So in general, sales guru across the board. He's held every sales position from SDR, inside sales rep, sales manager, director of sales, VP, sales ops, everything. So he's got his liberal arts degree in sales and has tremendous vision from the 60,000 foot view all the way down to the 5-foot tactics. So really excited to be talking to you today, Richard.
Thank you very much. I hope that wasn't too long and painful for everybody. But, I think that summed it up pretty well.
Awesome. Okay, so let's get into this. I've got some really interesting questions. Really quickly, just a shout out to our new brand. I hope everybody likes it. We used to be DemoChimp. Now we're Consensus. So essentially today I have some research, so some different quotes, and then I have some questions about these. So I think some of this is going to be a little bit controversial maybe. We'll see if we can stir the pot, but also towards the end I have some questions that should tease out, if we don't already see them, some really fantastic tactics about how to get around blockers and the overall idea of driving consensus. So just to clear the air, I know I just showed our new brand, Consensus. This is certainly not a promotion of Consensus. We're going to be talking about sales strategies, not consensus technology. So, okay, so let's get right into it. This is a quote from HBR. It says, sales teams must focus on the needs, tendencies, and agendas of all stakeholders in the buying group, not just the decision maker. A failure to do so can accidentally trigger a veto from any member of the buying group and ruin the sale. So some of you may have seen this book or this article, Making the Consensus Sale. So my question for you is, why do people veto a purchase decision?
God, there's 100 reasons why people veto. One has to do with the buying process as a whole, right? So there's always, as we move into the democratization of purchasing, I actually have something I'm working on with Sales Hacker specifically around this. I'm going to answer a little bit differently than I thought I would. The answer to the question is really, oftentimes we're taught the answer, right? Budget, authority, time frame, authority, need, urgency of money. And that doesn't work anymore. There's a new theory coming out that hasn't been officially released, but the A no longer stands for authority. It it stands for access to authority. You've got a democratized buying decision. And so you've got to understand who's going to get you access to that authority. That means you need to understand those players, your buyer personas, right, your ideal customer profile, the different titles that affects, and understand what makes that person tick. And what happens is that oftentimes, because it's 4 to 5 people involved in the decision making, while no one person can say yes, any one person can say no. It's often because someone hasn't taken the time, either you as the sales rep or even the organization, to make sure that everyone's real needs are being met, not the surface pain, but their real core pains. And those core pains are based on their individual roles and their titles for what they're responsible for. So for me, I think that things get vetoed more often, more around the fact that you haven't done a good job of discovery to understand real pain, not surface pain, right? I talk to clients all the time, and they say, I ask them what's their differentiator, and they say, well, gosh, we save people a ton of time and efficiency. I'm like, well, yeah, well, whoop-de-doo. So does everybody else, right? In the last 3 years, we've been able to save so much time, none of us should have to fucking work anymore. Things should be that simple. But, and I'm sorry for being crass, but, that's not a differentiator. Making you more efficient isn't a differentiator anymore.
Yeah.
Salesforce, 10 or 12 years ago, that made you more efficient, right? But it's still the same problems. It's about solving the core pains and it's about solving the why and the how, not the what.
Interesting. Okay. Awesome. Love that. That I think leads well to my next question. So this was something that came up when we were first talking, and you're sort of asking me about this, getting around and driving consensus and sort of what I thought about these things. And you jumped right into this idea that I never thought of. And so I'd love to share this with everybody. I think it's super interesting. You described the shift in B2B buying behavior as a shift toward B2C buying. So what's that all about? What and why is it important for us as B2B sales professionals to understand this?
Yeah, because the reason is just based on the research, right? And I'm happy for someone to say, no, Richard, you don't get it, or please disagree with me. I love to think that I have a lot of interesting thoughts, but I'd be the first person to say I'm not always right.
Which, by the way, sorry to cut you off quickly. I forgot to say this at the beginning. Everybody that's on, please put questions in the questions section. We'll answer them throughout. But that's available to you. We're monitoring it, so go ahead and interact with us. We welcome it. Sorry, go ahead.
Please call out any bullshit you hear. I'm happy to hear a different opinion. It's shifting because of the amount of research, I think, on both sides of the table, right? We all know that customers have the ability to do more research, but we as buyers as sellers have the ability to do more research as well, which means it's a personalized experience. It's personal, right? It's no longer, gosh, we need to refresh our computers every 3 years, so we need to set aside a budget for that. So it's a much more personal decision. Additionally, because the roles who are making these decisions are, they're being held accountable to these decisions, $20,000 a month, $10,000 a month, whatever it is. So it's a very, and there's a lot more transparency on how fast something actually works. And from that, people are being a lot more consumer skeptical approach, I think, to purchasing, which actually is better. It does elongate the sales cycle, but as the seller, we also have to take that personal brand and move it forward too, right? We need to stop saying phrases like, at the end of the day, let me take my salesperson hat off. Well, to be honest with you, these are the things that salespeople say. Those are the same words that make us cringe when we're the customer and someone's selling me. I'm like, really? Come on. So I think it's just become more personal because if it's a bad decision or a good decision, it can make a career or break a career. So I think that's why it's shifted, right?
Yeah, we've unofficially banned one of those phrases here at Consensus. Nobody's allowed to say from sales guy to sales guy.
Yeah, exactly.
Thankfully, thankfully we don't hire the kind of people that would say that anyway. But Okay, cool. Thanks. That's really interesting thinking. I love that line of thought. So let me get to this next quote. I think this is really interesting, and then this will intro for my next question. So Richardson's 2015 Selling Challenges study. So they say respondents were asked to name the and so they're surveying B2B sales leaders. Respondents were asked to name the most significant challenges they faced. More than a quarter of all respondents said finding ways to add relevant value to various stakeholders. So this next quote, supporting it, the challenger customers, so 80% of them saying, so they did another study, 80% of them saying they want more support from suppliers and communicating the value of the solutions that they championed. So here's the question. How do you add relevant value to all stakeholders and support communicating value? So again, this is around the idea of getting around blockers, right? It's a lot of, too many people, I think of this as a late stage problem, right? Oh, once you hit a blocker, now we have to figure out how to get around it. What I'm suggesting, I guess, overall is that it's getting around blockers is a life cycle problem, and you have to start early and do things early to engage all stakeholders. And so that's what this is talking about. So the question of kind of how do you do that, add relevant value to all stakeholders and support communicating value so that you head off any blockers early. But how do you do it? I mean, there's account-based selling, social selling. I mean,
Yeah, so it's the same as any of us want, right? We all just want someone to be there and have our back. Right? So anything you can do to have someone's back is a smart thing. There's been a big, strong push, particularly at the top of the funnel. I'm hoping my sound quality is going up the funnel.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
Okay. To me, it's about adding value. So we're talking a lot at the top of the funnel and different stages of the funnel about adding value in a cadence. And the one thing that always seems to be missing from the cadence is sending something without an ask. So you don't ask them to do anything. You're like, hey, I saw this article, thought you liked it, bye. Right? That adds value. That's you saying, hey, you're on my mind. My mom does this to me all the time. Right? She sends me articles and clippings from whatever. That's just what she likes to do. She doesn't put a note in there. She doesn't sign it. I just, I see the return address. I'm like, oh, Mom sent me an article. I guess I'll read it. And now I have this folder for my whole life of all these articles that my mom has sent. And it's also kind of fun, too. It's like she does it by mail, which is also kind of a creative way to do it because, she could have sent an email of the article. Like, what's a newspaper? Like, here's a newspaper. So I think adding value is the most important thing you can do. And adding value, to me, means you ask for nothing in return. People adding value the most.
Interesting.
So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I mean, So, I mean, I love that you simplified it that way. It just got straight to adding value in every action that you're taking. Of course, keeping in mind, okay. Well, we have a lot to cover, so I'm going to skip what I was about to share.
Let me expand on that real quick for 1 second. That doesn't have to be at the top of the funnel. That can be the back of the funnel. I think, and customer success shows us that the most, right? Customer success adds so much value, right? When you have a strong customer success organization or success people, their support that drives the renewals and the upsells and cross-sells, they're adding value all the time, right? They're actually the ones in some cases, seeking a problem to solve so that the customer feels like someone's got their back, right? And so, adding value doesn't need to occur just at the top of the funnel. It can occur, in the way I was talking before the sale, but it also happens during the sales cycle or after the sales cycle. It's those personal touches that really, really matter. So I'll stop there.
Interesting. So in a sales process, you hit a blocker, and are you suggesting if you hit a blocker, then we didn't create enough value along the way. So at that point, once a blocker is being resistant, whether vetoing, maybe you have access to the group and you have this individual blocker that's saying, doesn't work for me, so we can't do this. What do you do at that point?
Well, so this is what I say to people is that the reason you run into that blocker isn't because your closing skills are bad. It's probably because your discovery skills suck. And, that we haven't done enough discovery. It is possible that your solution is not the right solution, and you have to be willing to acknowledge that in many cases. You have to be willing to acknowledge that it's potential that someone's not going to see it the right way. That's not your fault. That's not their fault. I mean, it's your responsibility to avoid that and get around it. But, the blockers come up, in my opinion, when their needs aren't being met, right? When you aren't having a dialogue or a conversation. If you're just spewing features and that's when I see blockers coming up. That doesn't help. You gotta really dig into that individual person or that department or that team at a much deeper level, in my opinion.
Okay, so this one's kind of controversial. I'm going to skip this. This is just about the growing buying group, right? So what's really important to acknowledge that as the buying group is growing, more people can become blockers, which is why sort of account-based selling is getting a lot of steam, right? Reaching out to all stakeholders as early in the process as you can and creating personalized value for all of them. So this interesting thing I think about. Oops, my slides get out of order, so I'm just going to skip ahead. Okay, we'll skip that part because I messed up. Sorry. Okay, so CEB is talking about this buying group growing, and in their book, The Challenger Customer, it's, hey, any one of these individuals can veto a sale. Do you agree that the group is growing? Do you think this shows that it's a 50 percentage point drop from if you're dealing with one person to dealing with 5 or 6 people? Do you agree with this? Do you think this is accurate in terms of how buying groups are changing? Are 6 people actually influencing deals now?
Yeah, so you're asking 2 questions. One is, are groups getting bigger to make the decision? Yes, that is definitely changing. Does that make it more complex that the sale will go through? Yes and no. I mean, I didn't need to study to know this, right? Like, you don't.
Yeah.
It doesn't take rocket science to sort of figure out that, gosh, the more people involved in the decision, the harder the decision is going to be made.
Yeah.
It's not rocket science. But what it is brain surgery. You now then have to navigate not just the 5 decision makers, but you also have to navigate the personalities of them. They all have ego states, right? This is actually something I teach about the parent, the adult, the child ego, right? Every single person in the world has 3 ego states. It's their parent, it's their adult, and it's their child. Their parent is the person who gives approval or judgment. I think that all sounds familiar. The adult is the rational person who does pros and cons, pluses and minuses. And the child is the one that gets excited. The child has to say, I want it, right? You've got kids, you know what that sounds like. When the kid says, I want it, then the parent and the adult will actually get involved in the decision-making process. Oh, the airport's going off.
That's okay.
So I think...
We'll take you as you are, wherever.
In addition to these 5 people, you now got 3 personalities per person. You're navigating 15 personalities. So this isn't that unusual. It's like going to buy a car. I'm married. I'm not going to go buy a car without talking to my wife first. Of course, the decision-making process gets more complicated. Right?
Yeah.
So I love it when people put these studies out there to sort of say, hey, Captain Obvious, thank you. And the studies matter. Like, I don't want to totally cut down CEB. I love this stuff, some of the stuff they do, but
yeah.
It's like, if you needed this study to understand this, then you've got some significant challenges.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. So I'm going to suggest something. In the broader conversation about getting past blockers, helping groups to achieve agreement, there's it seems like there are two really major voices out there. One is saying account-based everything, account-based sales, reach every stakeholder. And the other is champion enablement. It's saying, hey, get to your prospect and then enable them to sell internally. Is it one or the other? Which do you side with?
No, it's both. And the fact that someone would, do you know who suggested that?
No.
Just one or the other? Or are you just seeing it out there?
I think it's both too. It's just an interesting thing that I see when I hear people talking about it. They're they sort of talk about it like it's one or the other, right? The only right way to sell is to reach every stakeholder with the right information at the right time, and then others are sort of going at it saying, hey, find CB for example, find your mobilizer, enable them to sell internally. They also talk about multi-threading, so I'm not saying anything about CEB, but it's you tend to see them existing in a silo in terms of in blog articles and what's out there. And
yeah.
I think I'm suggesting what you are saying too.
Yeah, so it's definitely a combination of both. It's not a choice of which one is the right one. It's the responsibility of the sales rep to do them both. Some sales cycles, for whatever reason, are going to be easier to navigate the multiple people and get them all on board, depending on the product you have, how disruptive it is, making sure that you understand your value prop as it relates to the ICPs. And others are going to need to find a champion, right? A single champion, that end user, the doer, the person who's actually going to get the most benefit and support them. But to say that one would need to do one or the other is, sales isn't like that anymore, right? It's not Vance, it's not Anim. Sales, this is the perfect analogy of what a sales cycle looks like right now. It's like trying to play chess on a trampoline. Right? It's complicated, right?
Yeah.
And you just have to learn how to better navigate the waters. You just got to figure it out, and it's never going to be the same thing twice. Yes, you need a process. Yes, you need a system in place. Yes, you need to know your information. But what it really says, all this stuff says to me, is that the seller has to be smarter than they used to be. Mm-hmm. Right? There's too much competition out there. There's too much price gouging on SaaS deals on the last day of the month. You've got to be a smarter than you used to be. And that's what matters most. And then from gathering all that intelligence, that's how you understand how to navigate all those pieces.
Okay. Awesome. I agree. Yeah, that's exactly what I was hoping to get out of that question. I think as I've talked to people, other sales leaders and things, they'll be excited about one initiative or the other. CEB talks about this really well. You just confirmed it. Some others as well. But yeah, having to do both, I think, is really critical. And being in the mindset of, and frankly, if we don't acknowledge these things, right, we're going to start to see, we may not see our numbers dip right away, but we'll definitely see the growth slow, right, in the next few years as this becomes more prominent. As our competition starts to, starts to engage in account-based selling and also enabling champions and doing those together so that they're helping the buyer to buy the way that they want to buy and matching the buyer's process, we're going to see that value. Okay, so I don't know how interesting this is. This is from Serious Decisions. I think we can get through it really quickly. But their point is, they gave some definitions around the types of buying groups. In terms of if we understand these, then hopefully we can build processes and strategies that will avoid blockers surfacing in late stage sales, right? The whole point of this webinar. So they say that there are three different types: committee, consensus, and input. They vary by size. How many buying centers, how many colleagues, typical time frame. I think the easiest way for everybody to just quickly understand this is, hey, is this, is it harder to, or the question that I want to ask you, do you think it's harder to help get a decision, help an executive leadership level team get to a decision or cross-functional teams to make decisions? And obviously, agreement among individuals is easier, but in these two, I don't think it's quite as clear. I was curious about what you thought about that. Which is harder?
I've never seen this, so I'm sort of digesting it. I think my initial response to this is that I like what I see because it's making me think about something I've never explored. And it's making me go, okay, I see some value in trying to understand that. So my opinion or my answer to this question is literally going to be that, an opinion. So I can't say that this is right or wrong. I won't say that, I disagree or I agree. I would be like, oh, this is interesting. I want to pay attention to that in my next couple of deal cycles and see what happens. Because it could also be how your product or service fits into their organization, right? Is it a must-have or a nice-to-have, right? So I think that's a little bit of it too. Is it easier or harder? I don't know. I don't know that I could say one is going to be harder than the other. All I can tell you is that you're going to have more. You're going to have the more people you have in the decision-making process, it just becomes a little bit more challenging. And it's the sales rep's responsibility to navigate those waters, right? And hopefully they have the support of a sales engineer or an SDR or a VP of sales or marketing or content or whatever it is to help navigate these multiple people as it's a consensus or committee. It's interesting to me. I think my first question is I'm not sure that I understand the difference between consensus or committee. But I'll stop there.
The difference that stuck out to me, I think, was dealing with executive level leadership or maybe director level or VP level, but cross-functional teams. I guess executive level is cross-functional too. As I was digging into, as I was digging into this, it seemed like the solution to avoid blockers in all three of these scenarios is the same, right? And it's what you talked about early on. It's driving value to the right stakeholders, relevant to their individual interests, which all happens from doing fantastic discovery. Does that sound right? Am I echoing what you're saying correctly?
Yeah, I'll quote a former CEO. I won't mention him by name because I don't want to upset him, but we sold a really complex solution once that was very technical, that didn't exist. It truly disrupted the space. And one of his favorite lines is that one of the reasons people buy from us was because our shit worked. So the first thing is your shit better work, right? If it doesn't, you're going to have a big problem. The other reason, though, that people bought from us is as we started talking to our customers, as we started to win against competitors, not only was it that our stuff worked, but it's also that we had our shit together, meaning that it was how we did business as much as the fact that we could do the business. We were very professional. Balls didn't get dropped. We had emails going out, setting agendas, 2 days before a meeting. We had emails going out confirming that, hey, we're still on for tomorrow. We made sure that each person was sort of addressed by name and title in appropriate slides as a presentation was being done. It was just, it was where, the little things matter, right? The devil's in the details. And those things matter a lot. So one, your stuff's got to work. And two, you got to position yourself properly. Now, the funny thing about all this is not once did it ever matter whether or not we wore a coat and tie as we sold to Fortune 500 companies. Right? We didn't go in looking like schlubs. But in the old school way, you better come in looking like, dressed to the nines, right? So, it was very much, Mad Men type dress. But that's not what people want now. People don't necessarily want your experience in helping others. They want to know that you're an expert at helping them. Experience, here's a perfect example of that, right? Is that, let's say you're talking to Pepsi and you've already sold Coca-Cola, right? And Pepsi's going to say, well, who else in the industry you sold that we know? And they'll go, oh, that's great. Yeah, we sold Coca-Cola. Well, what's Pepsi's first response going to be? Oh, that's great, but we're nothing like them. When in fact, well, why did you ask the question? It's like, you're so unique. Your pains are actually very horizontal. Yes, I need to position them properly, but so even the buyer is making the buyers are asking the wrong questions in some cases too. And as a salesperson, we need to be able to better understand how to respond to that.
Okay, great. So we have about 13 minutes left. So, and again, I want to welcome any questions from the audience if you guys want to if we're not going in the right direction, or you want something specific to you, go ahead and ask. We'll see if we can get to it. So I want to discuss one more idea quickly, and then get into some questions that should tease out some very specific tactics, I think, for getting around blockers. You've shared some great ones already. So I have this idea, or we have this idea, as we've been kind of living in this space of driving consensus and working with stakeholder buying groups and developing technology for that. And one thing that we've learned is this concept has surfaced of unwillingness to engage. So in the past, I think it's been called no decision, and people typically think of a no decision result as a late stage result. But what we're learning is that no decisions, the no decision is happening throughout the customer life cycle. So for example, in marketing, people are coming to your website, and let's say, industry average, maybe you have 2 to 5% website visitor to lead conversion rate. So flip that on its head, and, that means your website is 95 to 98% ineffective. Why aren't people thinking of it this way, right? So the no decision, I came to your website looking to see if if you could provide value for me, and you didn't, so I didn't convert. Later in sales development, right? It's, if you reach out to 100 people, typically on average, 10% are going to actually engage with you. Another 20 to 30% are going to say, don't contact me anymore. 40 to 70% are just, they might see value, but they're just not engaging. They just won't engage. They're not saying no. Is that a no decision? We're familiar with the late stage sales no decision, but even in customer success, it's there, right? Not adopting or not expanding the way that it should. So if no decision and is something that's happening at every stage, where should people start? Should they start, trying to fix it at late stage, or in marketing?
No,
I don't know the answer to this.
It happens everywhere. No, this is a great question, right? So here's the problem, and I see it, and people can go to my website and probably say, yeah, Richard, you need to follow your own advice. But here's what everybody needs to understand, right? Nobody gives a shit about what you do. They don't care. All they care about is can you solve their problem, their pain, that's unique to their title, their role, so that they don't lose their job. Mm. And if your website doesn't speak to someone that personally as a B2C consumer, then that's why you're missing an opportunity. Mm. Right? Mm. There's a big piece to that, right? Now, there is a lot of research going on, right? We know that when they contact you, they're not going to contact you till then. But keep in mind that part of what you're talking about, particularly on the website side, that's for inbounds, which is completely different than outbound, right? So, I love this quote from I think HubSpot said that 60% of the buyers or most of the buyers are 60% of the way through the sales cycle before they talk to a sales rep. Here's the part HubSpot left out: only if it's an inbound lead. Yeah. Outbound leads do not have that approach. Right. Because they're outbound. They haven't been asked to talk to you. They're not looking and researching. So you got to know who your customers are and what stage of the funnel you're looking at. But what you need, I think, in the website more, in the content more, is very specifically the customer stories, right? The third-party stories. Nobody is ever going to sell your product or service better for you than your own customers, right? Back to the Coke and Pepsi example. Pepsi wants to be very different than Coke. But what they're really saying is, well, at least we know you understand how to talk to a big company like us. Right? That's the step test. Right? And that's what they were really asking for. So you've got to have more information about the quality of the customers and the success they've had. And that is 100% on marketing. And this is what I would love to see out of marketing. Look, sales is responsible for closing deals. As part of our compensation package, marketing should be compensated on closing use cases and customer quotes. marketing companies love to say, well, I can't go do that. It's not appropriate. It's too hard. It's too this. It's too that. I can't ask that from them. Bullshit. That is exactly your job, marketing. And that's scary to marketing because marketing is much more transparent than it ever used to be, right? Marketing loves to jump all over sales and say, we sent you this many leads, they didn't convert, this, that. You know what sales should do is, hey, I sent you 50 customers in the last year. How many of them have you spoken to about getting a case study? How many of them said yes? How many said no? How about a customer quote? How many said yes? How many said no? Build a pipeline like that in your sales force, and you'll start to see greater senses of accountability, in my opinion.
I love that. That's fantastic. Okay. So thanks for answering that question. That's one of the things that I think is, one of the critical ideas that are around our community right now. So, okay. So some tactics about getting around blockers specifically. Okay. So you reach a blocker. It's kind of late stage. Let me ask this. This is more relevant, I think, to what you were just saying. So should marketing and sales development then be responsible for delivering buying groups? In addition, so you were talking about the testimonials and things, but in terms of what they're accountable to sales for delivering, should they be delivering buying groups instead of individual prospect champions? Whose job is it to reach all? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it is marketing's job to, it's a marketing and sales job to define the ICP. Right? There should be an SLA that the marketing doesn't get to define the ideal customer profile, nor does sales. But I can assure you that what I see most of the time is that marketing is doing it, that they actually haven't sat in on 25 sales calls from the beginning to the end. Right?
Yeah.
That's the disconnect between sales and marketing, right? And it's a real easy chasm to cross as long as people stop pointing the finger at each other. And I don't, look, if your sales pointing your finger at marketing, or your marketing pointing the finger at sales, every time you point your finger at one person, you've got three fingers actually pointing back at you. You should look at that and go, wait a minute, how do I improve this role? How do we become more accountable to each other? How do we support each other? And that's the big chasm I'm seeing with marketing and sales, is that marketing is being held more accountable in lots of different ways. Whether it's website visits and click-throughs and those kinds of things. But there's more to it than that now. That concept of marketing is 2011. It's now 2016. So yes, we need ICPs. Yes, if we can define the buying committee, by all means, any data you can give a sales rep around that committee and how that operates, go for it. I think that's great. That's a perfect next step. Why wouldn't we do it? The question is that I don't know that it can be done in a silo by only marketing or only sales. If marketing hasn't sat in on a 12-month sales cycle that had 12 or 15 meetings with 8 different people, and they haven't done that at least 4 or 5 times themselves, how can you then task them with coming up with something that's quality around that ICP group? It doesn't make sense. Now, sales might say, well, that's marketing's job, et cetera. They should be on those calls, et cetera. Again, I don't have the answer to that piece, but somewhere in there is the answer, and that's where that information's got to be.
That's what the CRO is for, right? This new role?
What? I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out what a CRO is.
Oh, okay.
And I love the role. I get it. It makes sense. But in some ways, I think, marketing people are going to hate this, but it'll be interesting to see if in the next 5 years, marketing starts to report to sales. What that really means is marketing reports to the CRO.
Yeah.
Right. And it was a way to do it in a way that doesn't become as offensive to marketing.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's how we did it. We didn't put forethought into it. It's just it happened organically. We founded the company. We started to grow. I was running marketing and sales. We tried to hire a CMO. It sort of worked. But about a year later, we switched back, and now, I've been running sales the whole time, and now we switched back to where I'm running sales and marketing, and it's fantastic. It's fantastic to build. As when I go to build the ICP, I'm doing it from a place of experience like you're talking about. I've been on hundreds of calls, and I've built the buyer personas and done the marketing side too, and it's just creating a seamless experience and a strategy that's very targeted. Anyway, we could do a whole other webinar on joining marketing and sales. Okay, so one last question. So I have a favorite question, I think, a tactic that I like to try when reaching a blocker. So this is, on the front lines, the blocker is you're on a call or in a meeting and they're just saying no, even though there are other people on the buying team that are saying yes, or in the buying group. So my tactic is this, and what I'm looking for is this a good tactic, why or why not, and, do you maybe have a better tactic? So what we do is we say, as we're talking to that blocker, we say, we ask questions to get them to surface the problem. So they say why they're blocking. And then we simply ask, if we could solve that problem, would you support moving forward to, adopt consensus or buy consensus? And then after getting that confirmation, then we suggest ways to solve the problem or the reason that they're blocking. We try to narrow it to one reason and get them to focus on that one reason with a commitment to move forward if we solve that. Is that the right way?
Yeah, I think so. I have a challenge. This is something personal about Richard. There are two things I don't do well in sales. One is I don't do maybes really well. I tell my customers that all the time. And I don't do politics. So the challenge is you've got the alpha person in the room. And that alpha person is saying something that no one else in the room is willing to stand up against. So it's a challenge because my approach is very direct. Because I will say, hey, that's a really interesting point. I might do what you said, and say, hey, if we could solve that problem, will that help? Can we move forward? I think that's absolutely a right approach. I'm also the guy, and granted, I run my own business, so I can do what I want to do and not have to worry about it. So not everybody's in the same boat. But I'd also be able to say, hey, I'd like to hear from everybody else in the room, just real quick, like, is his problem the biggest problem you have? Right? Is that the reason not to go forward? Are there 4 other reasons that this goes forward, that it needs to go forward? Now, that's a challenge, right? That's scary. Some sales reps are afraid to do it because they don't want to lose the deal entirely. Well, if you're at this stage anyway, you don't have anything to lose. 2, you're then relying on someone's bravery to actually stand up to that alpha person in the room. For me, what I think it really comes down to, though, is and this will happen. There's a lot of ways you can do this kind of thing. So, but I think you have to, if there's a group consensus, there are different people and different reasons people want this tool. So at some point, there's an economic impact of the decision, not a question of budget. It's a question of what's the economic impact of making this decision or not making this decision. So you have to try, maybe a softer way to say what I said is, well, hey, that's a really interesting point. Let's look at that from an economic impact perspective. By the way, person B, person C, how does this affect your team from an economic impact? What are you gaining out of this? Right? What are you gaining, person C? So all of a sudden, the person who's like, well, it's going to cost me $50,000. I don't want to lose $50,000. Well, yeah, but if it makes everybody else make an extra $150,000, then that person becomes less alpha. Well, they won't be less alpha, but they won't have as much strength to stand on. So I think the goal is to, probably the easiest way to say, get data first and trust your gut second. So try to get more data around that decision, around that person who's blocking. What is it? Okay, let's talk about that blocking. When you say you don't want to do it, what's that really mean to you? Why? How's that going to impact you? What's the actual negative implication from a monetary standpoint that you don't want this tool? And then you turn around and go to everybody else. Okay, so what's the positive economic impact to everyone? Or even back to that same person, right? You've got to make them see the light a little bit because oftentimes we can't see it ourselves. Right? They'll get in their own way. We all do it. We're human. We forget that, oh yeah, the other reason I'm doing this is this, not just that issue.
Well, we've come full circle, right? So we came all the way back to creating value for the individual to inspire individual confidence so that as a group they can make a purchase. Love it. Cool. I think we did it. Thanks, Richard. Thanks for having me on. Thanks to Sales Hacker. Sales Hacker did nearly all of the promotion. We promoted you, but nobody listens to us. So thanks to the Sales Hacker community, and it was a pleasure. I enjoyed it.
Yeah. Just real quick before we go, are there any questions? I know the quality of the audio may have been a little bad in the beginning. I hope it got better. I see we didn't lose a ton of people. But are there any questions the audience would like to hear or ask? Either one of us. Doesn't even have to be please turn around and ask Matt a question.
Not seeing any quite yet, but
Bueller.
The last webinar I did ended. I did it with Alice Hyman, who I love. She's fantastic. And at the end of it, the person that was monitoring was supposed to end the webinar. So we said our goodbyes, and then we both sat there so awkwardly for almost a full minute before it got turned off.
Yeah, okay. No worries. Not a problem. Well, thank you, everybody. We appreciate it. We certainly appreciate Consensus for coming to us with a creative and unique way to do things. I certainly enjoyed sort of this approach to doing everything, so thank you very much. It made my job a little bit easier today. And thanks, everybody, for joining. We'll talk to you again soon.